Yeah, hello everybody. Welcome to today's webinar, Mail Deploy goes cloud, introducing Mail Deploy SaaS. Bernd, our CTO, and I, Angelica, responsible for communications and marketing, are very excited to show you our new fully cloud-based SaaS solution. Yeah, the transition to the cloud is a hot topic for Qlik users all around the world right now. So we had a lot of registration for this webinar, and I think we can now fully dive in. Some info for you up front. You're muted now. If you have burning questions, please use the chat or the Q&A during our webinar and submit your questions to us. Otherwise, please wait until the end. Then you have the opportunity to directly ask your questions by just raising your hand, and then we open up the microphones. And don't worry if you come later or if you need to leave earlier. We've got your back and provide you with the recording within 48 hours. So a couple of words about Mail Deploy at the beginning. As a lot of you know it already, Mail Deploy provides a self-service enterprise BI reporting solution for Qlik. From report design and creation to sharing and automated scheduling, our solution brings reporting superpowers to Qlik users all around the world. We are on the market since 2008 and have become a notable player in the Qlik reporting ecosystem in the last couple of years. We are Qlik technology partners since last year, and so far we have been serving over 150 companies from small and medium-sized businesses to globally operating enterprises. We are a very partner-centric company and are proud that currently more than 50 Qlik certified partners are reselling and using our solution. Here you can see a couple of our customers. And now to today's agenda. First, I will give you a short introduction to Mail Deploy SaaS, what it is, and tell you what you can expect from it. Then I will hand over to Bernd. He will tell you more about the differences between the on-premise and the SaaS version of Mail Deploy, and of course, give you a live demo. And then finally, there should be enough time to answer all your occurring questions in our Q&A session at the end. Yeah, now we're curious, so let's jumpstart with a short poll. Short question from you to us. How's your current Qlik Cloud status? Would be great if you can answer that so we know where you are currently. Okay, the first results coming in. Thanks for participating. Oh, wow, yeah. Still keeping feet on the ground. Already gone sky high. Yeah, most of you are in the transition mode right now from on-premise to SaaS, and the others are still keeping your feet on the ground. Thanks for participating. It's good to see the current status of the Qlik Cloud. Yeah, I will now end the poll. Here you can see the results. Well, so, and now back to the presentation. To get us all on the same page, I just want to recap the benefits that come with the migration to the Qlik Cloud. Moving your analytics to the cloud offers, of course, some big perks, like increase agility and flexibility, and the ability to innovate faster, or it's easier to increase resource demands, a better management of your customer or user expectations, of course, a reduction in costs, and a simplified ID. The only questions that remains, however, is what is about the reporting capabilities in the cloud. And that is where Mail Deploy SaaS jumps in and serves as a perfect alternative to Qlik and printing on-premise and the new Qlik reporting services. So what is Mail Deploy SaaS? Mail Deploy SaaS transfers the principles and existing benefits of Mail Deploy to the cloud. It offers a seamless experience for Qlik users because they can simply log in and start using the reporting capabilities of Mail Deploy. There's no need to download or install any software. Our new full cloud-ready solution enables, so to say, easy reporting out of Qlik in the cloud. Qlik users have the full range of the common features of the classic on-premise solution, but Bernd will go deeper into this topic. And what remains, Mail Deploy, so we take over the maintenance work in terms of hosting and updates. And by doing this, we are following Qlik's cloud strategy and can offer Qlik users a smart, flexible, and solid reporting solution ready for the cloud. And now I will hand over to Bernd.
Perfect, thank you. Yeah, hello from me as well. Very excited to show you our SaaS solution. We've been working really hard in the past few weeks and months to get this ready. I'm just going to start to share my screen so I can do the live demo later on. So Angelika, can you just confirm that you can now see my screen?
Yes, everything works perfect.
Perfect. So I do think I have to go back one slide. Yes. So what I'm going to talk about in the next few minutes is a bit of the theoretical background or technological background. So what will change between on-premise and SaaS functionality of Mail Deploy? How can you migrate from an on-premise Mail Deploy to a SaaS instance? And also which editions are available and which special cases might have to be considered when you think about moving into the cloud with Mail Deploy. So the first important thing to mention is that we are, we have approached this project with a single platform in mind. That means that the actual code base of the on-premise and the SaaS version are the same. That is a bit different than Qlik does it itself. So the on-premise Qlik Enterprise version is not always in sync with the online version or with the SaaS version. We have a slightly different approach here. So it's actually the same piece of software that is running in our SaaS environment. And it's the same version as you can install and download on-premise. And that has a few advantages. For instance, that we only need to maintain a single code base. So all the new features, bug fixes, updates, they will be available for both on-premise and the SaaS version without any delay. So the software updates are both in sync. And that, of course, minimizes our development efforts or requirements. And also, when you're moving from an on-premise to a SaaS version in Mail Deploy, or you have to work with both versions because you're in a transition period, you will get the same experience whether you have the on-premise or the SaaS version. There are a few features that are deactivated in a SaaS environment simply because for obvious reasons, they do not make any sense. For instance, saving reports to the local file system. Of course, that is not possible in the SaaS version, because it wouldn't make sense to save to the SaaS instance to which you don't have any access on a file system. And also integrated Windows authentication is deactivated because, of course, the SaaS instance is not in your domain. So you have to revert to other authentication methods such as Azure AD or Auth0 or any other OpenID identity providers. Qlik is a special case. So the connections to Qlik data sources are deactivated in our SaaS version by default. But if you're a partner and you have a customer using Qlik and they want to move to the SaaS version, or you are a customer using Qlik and you want to use the SaaS version of Mail and Deploy, there are options to still make that possible, but it needs to be set up on request, because it requires a Qlik desktop client on the SaaS instance, and we would have to prepare that manually. But so just so that you know that it is possible, it's just deactivated by default, and we should probably talk about it when there's a requirement for that. Now, the SaaS edition or the SaaS version is available in the following editions. And I will talk about pricing at the end of the presentation. So for now, we're talking about the technical details. So we do have a standard edition that gives you an instance that has 2 CPU cores and 4 GB RAM. And there is no parallelization. So that means only one task execution at any given time. So that means there is no way to, if you have lots of reports and you want to parallelize the execution, that's not possible in the standard edition, and they will be processed sequentially. The Plus edition will have 5 parallel executions, 4 CPU cores and 8 GB RAM. And the Enterprise edition has 10 parallel executions and 8 CPU cores, 16 GB of RAM. And in the Enterprise edition included is a test server. So you actually get 2 SaaS instances. And the test server has 4 CPU cores, 8 GB RAM, and 5 parallel executions. So in other words, the Enterprise edition has the 10 parallel execution instance with 8 CPU cores and 60 GB RAM, and the Plus edition as a test system. As with the on-premise versions of Mail and Deploy, you can move content between individual editions. So if you have a test server and a production server, then you can develop or design your reports, set up your tasks in the test environment, test it from there, test it on that test instance, and then automatically, or by just the clicks of a few buttons, deploy that content into your production system. So that's included in the SaaS version as well. And it even works between an on-premise and a SaaS version. So even if you have a local Mail and Deploy instance and you want to move your reports and tasks into your SaaS instance, that also works through the built-in deployment feature. Customize edition. So if you need additional hardware or more parallel executions, or you have very RAM intensive reports that need to be created, are always available on request. And we just need to, figure out which hardware is required for your particular requirement, and how many parallel executions you need. So the 3 that you can see here, that's not the end of the story. You can always go and get more dedicated resources whenever you require that. So a little bit more technical background. So the SaaS instances of Mail and Deploy are hosted by AWS. So we have decided to partner up with Amazon Web Services. That means that all AWS regions are available. So that means we have servers in North America, so in the US and Canada, Italy, France, Ireland, London. I think one is in Sweden. So lots of choices. However, for special cases, for instance, you need a server located in a region that is not available in AWS. Custom setups are available, so we can then either fire up an Azure VM or any other cloud provider actually is compatible with Mail and Deploy. So that is especially for cases where, for instance, for legal requirements, you need to have the server in the same country as you or your customer are located. And if AWS doesn't offer that country as or doesn't have a data center in that country, there still is it's still possible to fire up a SaaS instance and work with Mail and Deploy. Yeah, one word about the migration, or a few words, I should say. So if you currently have an on-premise Mail and Deploy version 3, then moving all your content to Mail and Deploy SaaS is really easy. For those of you who are familiar with Mail and Deploy, you probably know that all the content of Mail and Deploy is stored in a single file, which is called repository.db. And if you want to move your on-premise content to SaaS, then you can simply provide us this repository DB, and we can set up your SaaS instance with that repository file. So you will have everything as you did before in your on-premise version. So that's really easy to do. And as I said before, there's also the option to deploy individual content, such as a single report from an on-premise version to a SaaS instance in Mail and Deploy. Okay, enough words said. Let me jump into a live demo. Yeah, so what you can see here is I have connected to my personal test SaaS instance here. So the URL for our SaaS instances are always, in my case, BP, because these are my initials, but it could be, your company name or whatever, .mailanddeploy.com. Once I'm here, I'm presented with a login page. So I've just entered the credentials that were sent to me when the SaaS instance was created. And I can log on. And for those of you familiar with Mail and Deploy, you may already notice that you'll get the exact same interface that you also get when you launch your on-premise version of Mail and Deploy. The main difference, as I said before, so you still have user management, user group management. The only exception, as I said before, is that integrated Windows authentication is not supported because the SaaS instance is not part of a domain, and certainly not your local domain. But user directories such as Azure AD or identity providers like OpenID Connect are supported, so you can synchronize your users and authenticate your users through those identity providers. Now, to show you very quickly how fast you can get a report from Mail and Deploy SaaS, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create a workspace. So as you may know, workspace is what hosts or what contains connections to data sources, reports, tasks, and all content in Mail and Deploy. I'm just going to name the workspace demo and log on to the workspace. And now I can see, as I said, as in the on-premise version, my data sources, reports, tasks, alerts, subscriptions, and so on. Now, when I create a data source, you will notice that the two Qlik view options are missing. So that's what I said before. They are deactivated by default, but if you have a requirement or a scenario or a use case where a Qlik view connection from a SaaS instance makes sense, we can definitely make that happen. Yeah, so in my case, I'm going to connect to a Qlik Sense SaaS app. And what I need to do here is I have to, let me quickly connect to my SaaS instance so I can also show you how you can create an API key, because that some of you may not be familiar with creating API keys in Qlik SaaS. So what I have to do first is I have to copy the root URL of my SaaS tenant, of my Qlik SaaS tenant, and paste it as a URL in my data source connection here. And then I need an API key, and I've already created an API key for this presentation beforehand. But if you're not familiar how creating an API key works, when you're in your Qlik SaaS environment and you go to your profile settings, then there's an option here that says API keys. And then you can simply generate a new key, give it a name, an expiration. And when you then, let me just do this, test, generate, and then you get your API key here, and you can just copy that and paste it here in the API key field in Mail and Deploy. Now, then I can click the refresh button here, and I get a list of all the Qlik Sense apps that are contained in the Qlik SaaS tenant. And I'm just going to pick my personal demo app, give the data source a name in Mail and Deploy, and confirm this. Now, before I can start to build a report from this app, from this data source, I have to rebuild the cache. As I said, pretty similar to the on-premise version. So Mail and Deploy has now queried some meta information about the Qlik Sense app, such as the field names contained in the app, the tables, the sheets, variables, visualizations, and so on, that can then be used when designing a report. So, Angelika, just a quick interruption here. So I saw someone raised their hand, and I saw something pop up in the QA section. Is there something that I should answer right now?
Yes, that's true. It's just about the plans with Microsoft Azure. So maybe we can skip it for now and then answer it in the Q&A.
At the end. Okay, that's fine. That's fine. Okay. Yes, so when it comes to report design, that works exactly as it does in the on-premise version. So the actual report design process is still done in a local Windows app. So if you want to launch the designer for the first time, you need to first download it here. And you need to configure it on your local machine. That does not require any admin rights. It's usually done within just a few seconds. So if you want to design a report for the first time on that particular computer, then you need to do that. I've already done that before, so I can now create a report. I'm going to choose a Word report and call it Demo SaaS Report. All the other options here are optional, so I can just confirm it. And by clicking the design button, it launches the designer, and that may take a few seconds if I do it for the first time in a new SaaS instance. Here we are. And the report design process, there's really no difference to an on-premise version. So I can create a new Word template. Let's just call it template. Double click it. and that launches an instance of, in this case, Microsoft Word in the designer. I can just edit this document as I can edit any other Word document. Says demo report. And whenever I want to insert a chart or a table from my Qlik SaaS app, I can go to the data source browser up here, and that lists me all of the data sources connected to my Mail and Deploy SaaS instance, and I can see all the fields in the data source. I can see all the sheets in the data source. In this case, it's a very small one, and all the objects within a sheet. And so if I wanted to, insert this pie chart here into my report, I can simply right-click it, new chart element, and then drag and drop it into the Word template. Adjust the size of the object, the position. I can set up that I want to export this chart with ultra high quality so that it's not pixelated and it's still very sharp even when using very high zoom levels. And I've now clicked the preview button that now creates a preview, downloads the preview to my local computer, and opens it up in my local Word instance. And you can see that I now have this pie chart in here, and yeah, can continue to design my report, set up filters. So that's all very similar to the on-premise version of Mail and Deploy. So one thing that I actually forgot to mention that may be quite important to know is when I create a data source in Mail and Deploy SaaS, I can still use a Qlik Sense on-premise server app. So the SaaS instance of Mail and Deploy can actually bridge the gap between a local or private cloud instance of Qlik Sense and Qlik SaaS apps. So that means if you have a Qlik Sense Enterprise on-premise in your local network or in a private cloud, as long as Mail and Deploy can connect to that instance, so you may have to open some ports or set up a proxy server to root, you can actually use both the SaaS and the Qlik Sense server app, which is especially useful in transition periods when you still have lots of your Qlik Sense apps on premise and you want to start doing reporting, and you then want to move step by step to a Qlik Sense SaaS environment. Then you can do all of that with just a single Mail and Deploy instance, because it is it can connect to both. Let me just pick one more example. So I've now exported a chart element. I can also choose to, and let me just go into my app here so I can see what tables I have there and which filters I may have to set. Yes, so I can actually, I don't even think I need a filter here. So let's say I wanted to export this pivot table here, example pivot. Then I can locate this in the data source browser, and remember that also supports to filter. So I can type in example pivot, and so it only shows the entries matching my search string up here. And then I can right-click, new table element. And then I do have some additional options here. Because it is a pivot table, there's lots of configuration options, very similar to or actually exactly the same as the on-premise version of Mail and Deploy. So how should a null value be displayed? Do you want to include headers, totals? Do you want to select all columns of the table or just particular ones, or exclude particular ones? How should column widths be set up? How should row heights be set up? And all that stuff. In this case, I'm just going to pick indent rows so that it displays the pivot table with an indented first, with all the dimensions indented in the first column of the table. And then I just drag and drop it here. And I'm going to create another preview. And again, functionality very similar to the on-premise version in the sense that it will by default export the pivot table in with exactly the same format as the one in the Qlik app. So you can see that the margin column here has red and green text colors, and the same has been applied to the exported table. So that's how exporting tables works in Mail and Deploy SaaS. Yeah, let me save this one and go back to the management console. As I already said when going through the slides, there are just a few things that are not available in the SaaS environment. Other than that, when you create a distribution task in Mail and Deploy, it's still same functionality. You create your task by adding multiple different actions, and you can choose from predefined actions here. There are just some options missing here which do not make sense in a SaaS instance. For instance, for example, the save report to file system is not available here because yeah, it doesn't really make sense in the SaaS environment. Other than that, everything is the same as it is in the on-premise version, so I'm not gonna spend too much time here. There's one feature that has slightly changed in SaaS, but this change will also be available in the on-premise version. So once version 3.2 is finally going to be released next week, you will also have that functionality in the on-premise version. And that is that Mail and Deploy supports a data exchange feature. So that means that all of the execution data, so everything that you need for monitoring, log files, how many report documents have been created, what was the average execution time, all that stuff. In the on-premise version, it used to be written to a local SQLite database. And that, of course, doesn't make any sense in a Qlik SaaS environment, which is why we have added the possibility to write all these data exchange features to an SQL server. So if you have an SQL server, then you can directly connect Mail and Deploy to that server and write execution data there. And you can then use this SQL server to load data into a Qlik app, for instance, and do all your Mail and Deploy report monitoring using that Qlik app. There's also the option that we set up, and actually we do always set up a SQL server in the SaaS tenant. So when you create a SaaS or request a SaaS instance, you will get connection information for a SQL server that is running within the SaaS environment here. So you can also use this SQL server, so you don't need to host your own SQL server instance. You can actually use that to export your data and load it into your Qlik monitoring app. Okay, so I think I said everything that I wanted to say about in the live demo. As you may have noticed, it's very, very similar to the on-premise version. So you should. Oh, my my Siri has just activated for whatever reason. So it's very similar, and those of you who are familiar with the on-premise version will have no problems, finding your way in the SaaS version. Maybe, I don't know, Angelika, if there are any questions regarding the live demo that I should answer, still having the management console open, then just give me a quick.
Yeah, there were some questions we can address now. I already answered it, but maybe you can address it again. Would SharePoint still be able in the cloud or in the SaaS version?
Yes, it is, because if we're talking about an on-premise SharePoint instance, then it is possible, but of course only if your firewall and proxy servers and whatever allow the SaaS instance of Mail and Deploy to actually connect to your local SharePoint instance. If we're talking about the SharePoint Online, a SharePoint Online instance, that's absolutely possible, yes. So that's,
yeah, I think that was a good answer to this question. And another question came up concerning the API key. Does the API key reflect the permissions of the user who generated it?
Yeah. So yes. So when I log on here and create an API key, the API key contains or reflects the permissions that I, Bernd Podratsky, have as a user. That's correct. So if you want to have special permissions for Mail and Deploy, it's probably a good idea to have a dedicated Mail and Deploy user and create API keys for that user so that you can yeah, more, or it's easier than to give that Mail and Deploy SaaS instance dedicated permissions for your Qlik SaaS environment. I guess in 95% of the cases, it will be full access for Mail and Deploy anyway, because, but yeah, you can limit it by creating a dedicated Mail and Deploy profile.
Mm-hmm. Okay, next question. Does this SaaS version still allow access to the Mail and Deploy API?
Yes, everything exactly the same as on-premise, so you can still connect to, in this case, https bp.mailanddeploy.com/API. You can create your API key if you create a new user here, API user, and then just use the existing functionality to connect to the SaaS instance. And I think that there was one more question.
Yeah.
Regarding Azure.
Future plans. If we are planning to support Microsoft Azure in the future, and then if you can then use the Azure AD for the logon.
Yes. So the Azure AD authentication also works regardless of whether the SaaS instance runs on an AWS or Azure machine. So if you have an Azure AD supports OpenID Connect, and then you can go to settings, user directories, create a user directory, and connect your Azure AD directory. So even though the SaaS instance is running on an AWS, I can use authentication provided with an Azure AD. If the requirement is actually to, as I said before, have the SaaS instance located in a data center of a specific country that's not offered by AWS, then absolutely we can also fire up an Azure virtual machine and run Mail and Deploy from there. We'll just have to see what the infrastructure costs for Azure are, and if that changes anything in the pricing. But from a technical point of view, it's definitely possible, but not, as I said, not required for the Azure AD authentication. So I hope that that answered the question.
Another question just came in.
Okay.
We rarely run into an issue where the Mail Deploy service 3.1 is terminated unexpected. How would we manage this in SaaS environment?
Oh, so first of all, this is a bug, and we should fix it also for the on-premise version. I'm not familiar with have you created a support case for this issue, or I don't know if you can actually append something to your question. If that happens in the SaaS environment, it will usually be restarted within a couple of seconds. So that shouldn't be a problem. But at the end of the day, it's a bug that should be fixed, and we should find out why it terminates unexpectedly.
Yeah, support ticket is not yet open, so
okay,
please just get in touch with us, and we will take care of it.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah, if there are no more questions about the technical side or where you can use the live demo, maybe the pricing.
Yes. So let me fire up the extension, the presentation. So our SaaS pricing for the 3 editions is, so the standard one is 5,400 euros per year, or 6,000 USD per year, of course, depending on the exchange rate. The plus version is 8.5 and 9,400 USD per year, and enterprise is, that depends on your specific requirements. So if you need an enterprise edition, get in touch with us. There is also a 5% discount if you have a 3-year contract. So those are the prices for a year-to-year basis, and if you have a 3-year contract, you get 5% off that price, of the price that you can see here. Okay, so I think that I've covered everything that I wanted. So if there are any additional questions and or anything that we haven't answered yet, and you want us to answer it, feel free to raise your hand, or I think, Angelika, you can also unmute.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
No more questions.
Okay, I think.
So you made a great presentation.
No, I just saw that someone raised their hand. I don't know. Oh, maybe I have to unmute because I'm the host now.
Yeah.
Oh, that's completely okay. Let me quickly unmute you. Oh yeah, I think you should be unmuted now.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can.
Okay.
Yeah.
I have a question about QlikView. I know, I understand that it's a manual setup, but what is it, a one-time manual setup, or do we have to manually then update the software and the hardware and in the future, or is it just a one-time manual change?
No, that's just a one-time manual setup. So it basically involves installing a QlikView desktop client on the SaaS instance. Then we need to somehow license that QlikView desktop client by either having a dedicated desktop license or a leased license from a Qlik server for the Mail and Deploy service account. But once that is set up, you don't have to change anything after that.
Okay, but what happens if like QlikView, there's upgrades in the QlikView client? Then would you maintain that, or do we need to maintain that?
I think the best way in that case is that when you update the so I think that the server and the client versions of QlikView should always be in sync, because otherwise there may maybe some problems.
True.
So I think that when you upgrade to a new Qlik server instance or version, then the best is probably if you notify us that you're going to upgrade your Qlik server to version 12.8 or whatever, and then we're going to do the same for the Qlik desktop client in your SaaS environment.
Okay, so we would just need to coordinate it going
Yes.
forward.
Yeah.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Okay. Okay, so there's another question that just came in. Is the pricing for SaaS different when providing your own SaaS tenant? I'm not sure. So when you say providing your own SaaS tenant, you mean that you take care of the infrastructure. You provide the virtual machine or whatever in your hosting environment. Okay, so apparently I understood it correctly. Actually, if you host your own, so if you have RDP access to those virtual machines, then you wouldn't even need the Mail Deploy SaaS version, because the SaaS edition of Mail Deploy includes the infrastructure and the software. If you have your own hosting provider that hosts your Windows machines on which you can run Mail Deploy, you can simply install a Mail Deploy on-premise version there, because it has all the features of the SaaS version plus everything that doesn't make sense in a SaaS environment. So I think if you're an MSP and you do your own hosting, you can definitely do that with an on-premise version of Mail Deploy.
Yeah, thanks is the answer. So the questions is answered.
Perfect.
Any more questions?
Yeah, who's screaming in the background?
That's my kids. They're so excited.
Yeah, they also love the SaaS version of Mail
Yeah.
Deploy, right? Very good. So if there are no more questions right now, I mean, you can always get in touch with us and write us at info@mailanddeploy.com, or the support case that was just raised in the Q&A. Open a ticket, and yeah, I think the presentation should be available in tomorrow or the day after.
48 hours, yeah. We will
Perfect.
send you the recording and also the questions that came up and that we answered. So
perfect.
So you have the full picture of our new cloud-based SaaS solution.
Perfect. Yes. So I don't think there are any additional questions for now.
Perfect.
Then thank you for your attention. I hope you got all the information you need about our SaaS version. Looking forward to working with you also in Mail Deploy SaaS. And I hope you have a great day. Angelika, I leave the last words to you.
Yeah, enjoy your rest of the day. And now you have 10 minutes free, so grab a coffee and hear from you soon.
Perfect.
Thanks for joining.
Have a great day. Bye-bye.
Bye.